I have been hearing a lot about the big problem lately, so much so that I am sick of hearing it. In this video, I hope to show the obviousness of it and the obvious solution that if we would have been doing all along, we would have beat this thing in the first month and possibly still could now. So let's get on with it. Hello guys, I'm going to tell you a few things about myself, so I hope you take the time to listen, okay? When I was a little kid, I watched the Kennedy assassination on TV. They ran it over and over again. And I mean, I'm a little kid, and they're telling me that this guy on the grassy knoll did it. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, no, he didn't. That guy was hit by 2 sharpshooters. I could see that from here. Even as a kid, I'm looking at it with my own eyes, man. That's a lie. I find out later there was actually 8 shooters. But that's a whole different story, okay? So then we march on, and in 1991, I watched George Bush come on and talk on the network television and talk about the NWO.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
I'm not going to get into that too much, but if you go over to Odyssey and put in and George Bush talks, you know what, and you will get tons of that guy babbled on about it. So I thought, oh, they want to take over the world. Now that's a little weird, but I didn't think anything could really happen of it. So then what happened was eventually when they hit the towers, it took me 3 days to figure that out. 3 days. It was easy. And I'm going to tell you what I tell young guys all the time is I say, look, man, if there's anything I can tell you coming from my age to yours that you will take with you for the rest of your life, let me try this one thing, and that is always, always, always question authority. If what you are seeing with your own eyes and your own brain is different from what they're telling you, believe your own eyes and your own brain. And so I'm looking at this thing, and first off, we all know it didn't look right. But one of the things that people seem to always do is overlook the most obvious stuff. And the most obvious thing on that was 2 planes, 3 buildings fell. Nobody wants to talk about Building 7. If you ain't never heard of it, you can probably look it up on YouTube. That thing fell with nothing hitting it. Okay, and people are like, okay, let's move on. And I'm like, no, let's not move on. That is a very big thing. That tells you something is extremely wrong here. That's obvious. And then from there, it really wasn't hard. They told me that fire did it. So I went and looked up pictures of skyscrapers that had burned. And there was a bunch of them. Most of them are gone. I went back and looked for them, but they were there then. And, you know, once those things really get going, they can't put them out. They have to let them burn themselves out. And here's the deal. None of them have ever fallen. I have 2 screenshots that I kept, which aren't the best ones. I didn't know. I wasn't very tech savvy back then. So then they told me it was jet fuel. So, you know, I went and looked up jet fuel. Well, jet fuel is like kerosene. It doesn't even burn as easily as gasoline. And it burns at about 850 degrees. Steel melts at 2200. Now, I don't care what kind of weight was on those beams. 850 degrees ain't going to melt them. That was obvious, so that was bullshit. And I also went and looked up skyscrapers that had been hit by planes. The Empire State Building was hit by a plane. Now, I couldn't find any with big planes, but it was hit, and it's still standing, okay? So they said it was furniture burning. All them other skyscrapers had furniture in them, so it wasn't that. But you know what really got me was the testimony of the firemen, because we still had some real media back then. And all the firemen that were there said the same thing. They said, I heard this pow, 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 pow. All of them said that. And I looked at it and I watched it and I realized the way they got it to free fall like that was they blew they blew floors out one under the other.
As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion.
Inside the lobby.
There were continuous explosions.
Floor by floor instead of popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
detonated. They were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
Why?
Another thing I did was I went and looked up botched demolitions, and there was a bunch of them. The important ones are gone now. I've tried to look them up since. But they had one where they blew the bottom out of it, and the thing fell, and it was like when you drop a pencil on its eraser, it went, and then it fell over. So none of it was right. It was easy to prove. It took me 3 days to get it. I probably got more of that information later. And when that happened, what I did was I knew that our own guys had done it. I realized that they had just killed 3,000 of us in one of our own cities. Now, most people know this now, but I figured it out within days. It wasn't hard to do if you question authority and look with your own eyes. And they just killed 3,000 of us in one of our own cities, and I knew that the threat was now domestic, and I'm like, why did they do this? And then when they sent the planes off to start the endless war, I knew. That gave them power over oil-bearing countries, and then the Patriot Act, which gave them more power over us, and I knew they would be coming for us. And a lot of my friends who were military, they said, oh, Scotty, I'm going out to defend my country. And I'm like, no, you're not, brother. You are going out to work for the enemy of the people now. You are going out to do the dirty work for our enemies against us. Can you not see this? And so, but that's, you know, there's nothing I can do about the world, how the world sees it. But these things are so easy to see through if you try. Time marches on. They begin to have the school shootings, and I don't know about them. Some of them were fishy, but I couldn't get conclusive evidence. I need conclusive evidence on this stuff. I question everything. And but there was one shooting. It was one in Florida. It was the one where they had that cop on the cell phone outside, and he was told to stand down. And I'm not going to get all into how I figured that one out. But that was fucking easy, too. And I realized at that point they went in and they shot people's children. It was easy to figure that one out. Easy, conclusively. And that's extreme. Killing 3,000 of us in one of our own cities is extreme. Doing that is extreme. What they were trying to do with the schools was get the guns away, right? Which Americans were really reluctant to give up their guns, which I was glad to see. I'm not sure if all of them knew why, but they're reluctant to give them up. And so, bang, then time marches merrily on, and we get this whole COVID thing, right? Now, that took me 6 days to figure out, but there was a couple of things right away, okay? The main thing, the third building on that one, the building 7 on that one was easy to figure out. This was America, okay? It's where the government serves the people, and the people are supposed to be in charge. That's the way it was originally designed. All right, so government can tell me that I should close my business, but they can't make me do it. They can tell me that I should stay home, but they can't make me stay there. They can tell me I should wear a mask, but they can't tell me that I have to. This is up to me as an adult to decide what precautions I want to take. That's the way this country was. Plus the fact I've lived through 7 pandemics in my life. There's been 5 of them in this century. They are getting more common, but this is because they are producing them. But that is a different subject, so I'm not going to get into that here. I've lived through 7 of them. 3 of them have been corona. And if you don't remember those, maybe it's because the media didn't tell you to. Okay, so obviously something was going wrong here. So that was the third building, was to shutting us down, telling us we should shut down, and immediately I knew something was terribly wrong. And then from there, it wasn't that hard. The TV is telling me, right? The TV, like, I'm supposed to believe that. It's telling me, everybody's sick, everybody's dying, everybody's sick, everybody's dying. So I'm like, really? I'm supposed to believe the TV, huh? Yeah. So you know what I started to do? I started going to hospitals. I'm like, I want to see this. Prove it to me. I started going to hospitals, man. And I've been to 20 or 30 hospitals. Of course, after that, I kept going to them for probably 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. And I travel, so I've been to a lot of different ones. I've been to New Orleans. I went to Houston. These hospitals were all empty. I tried to talk to medical personnel. They would just walk by me like I didn't exist, but I did. A couple of them did stop to tell me that, hey, I can't talk to you. I can lose my job. Somewhere in Georgia. Emergency medical center. Hospital. It's rocking. People everywhere. I'm not sure what happened to the truck where they're putting the body bags, but I guess maybe they don't have any here, because this is a small town just like all the other ones I've been to, including Houston, where there ain't shit going on at their hospitals either. Shit. Huh. Nothing. Nothing going on. Well, some of the other doctors I talked to, they told me they ain't allowed to talk to me about it. The other people I know, they're medical personnel. I know you can't. Well, guess what? Something is extremely wrong there. That is another third building. All right, that was obvious. So eventually I did end up talking to medical people in privacy, and all the ones I talked to told me the inside of them hospitals were empty. They said there wasn't nothing going on. And then they're laying off workers. It's pretty easy to see what's going on. And then they started this whole vax thing. Now, I want to talk about that. You guys know for a minute. You guys know how many world takeover attempts there's been in the past? Well, I'm going to talk about just a few here because there's been many. I spent last winter in Mexico. South America, Spanish is not their original language. They speak Spanish because they were conquered by the Spanish, who killed millions of people and made slaves out of who was left and set out to take over the world. This is why so much of the world speaks Spanish. The British did the same thing, which is why so much of the world speaks English. The ones who actually conquered the most land in history was the Mongols under Genghis Khan, 300-something years after Christ. They conquered the most land, and it goes back to before Christ, and there's been a bunch in between. And even without them, there's always been some little tyrant who's conquering what he can. And this has been going on in my life all over the world, and they always rule. It's always the same. They always rule through fear, torture, murder, and slavery. That's what they always do, and this has been going on. And the guys who came to the U.S., they were under the rule of King James III, and they wanted out of that, man. So they came over here, and they knew what it was like not to have freedom, and so they were willing to go through a lot to get it. They came here, they had to brave a wild land. Then they had to fight the British out of here because the British wanted to rule. And then they tried to make rules to stop this from happening again, because this is what all of human history looks like. Times of peace and prosperity for the average person, such as I've gotten to live in and you've probably gotten to live in, are very rare in human history. Very rare. This is what makes history so important. So they try to stop this from happening by writing the Constitution. In the Constitution, this is interesting, is the federal government, they were, their job was to defend our shores, nothing else. States would govern themselves. And they're obligated by the Constitution to arm and train the militia, which exists only to take them out if they got out of control, because those guys knew this shit happens just over and over again. So that's the way it originally started. And freedom of the press, because you cannot have freedom, you cannot have a free country without freedom of the press. The press's job is to put the big guys under a microscope and then report back to us what the hell they're doing. But now they own the press. We all know that, right? And even after that, we had genocide of the Indians and generations of slaves. And it's only been in recent times that that's changed, and we've gotten to live without that for a short time, and now they're trying to take us back. Now I'm going to talk for a minute about a guy whose name was Joseph Goebbels. He worked for Adolf. He was the minister of propaganda for Adolf, and he was extremely successful with what he did, and he left us a lot of writing. I've looked up a lot of the stuff that he talked about. And he said that if you tell somebody something over and over again, eventually they will believe it, and you yourself will come to believe it. But here's one of the things that's interesting, is Adolf came to power not long after radio was invented. Joseph said we never could have done this without radio. Now, this is what he did. He went to an electronics company. He got them to make cheap, inexpensive radios so that everybody could have one in their house. So these things were built so that they wouldn't pick up long-wave transmissions. They were built that way on purpose. So everybody had one in their house so they could listen to Adolf's daily transmissions, but they couldn't hear foreign news, which was illegal. Over 1,500 Germans were jailed for listening to foreign news. Does that sound familiar to you? Okay, we have the mainstream media now spewing out lies. A lot of people won't even watch it anymore. Okay, meanwhile, if you say anything that's against their agenda, they call it hate speech, while they are busy taking our country apart. Now, there is still a section of the internet that is free speech, and I will leave you guys links on how to get there. I made a video about how to find it. Now, it is imperatively important that people go find the truth, which most people won't, and that's why we're going to lose. They don't think it's important to find the truth, but if the mainstream was putting out what's really going on, because on the other stations we have news broadcasters, doctors, we have virologists, we have scientists, and you got to weed through the bullshit, but they're there, the legitimate stuff. If the mainstream was putting that out, the whole country would be up in arms. Now, there's a reason none of these world takeover attempts in the past have ever succeeded. You know what that is? Too many people. Simply too many people. So, for this one, what they intend to do is get rid of about 90% of the population. That's right, 90% of the population. Now, what do you think they're pushing this vax so hard for? If you go over and begin to look and listen to the scientists talk, and listen to the doctors talk, and listen to virologists talk, you will get a completely different story over there. Now, what they're all saying is this mRNA has been around for a long time. I think about 90 years, the stuff that they're putting in this thing. They say that they skipped animal testing, but they didn't skip animal testing in the past. This was tested on a bunch of different kinds of animals that I won't get into. But what happened was some of them had reactions and died right away, like we're seeing happen with all kinds of people. If you look
Honey. Cute. Honey. Hey.
If you go look at the alternate news, you will see two people in my friend circle have died from that shit. One of them was in his 20s. Okay? The other animals got sick later, but none of them lived past 2 years. Now, this is because this stuff compromises your immunity system, and then later something else kills you. So why do you think they're in such a hurry to get it into everybody so fast, and why they're pushing it so hard? This is what's going on. History is repeating itself. Why wouldn't it? It always does. So when they started this whole COVID thing and I figured it out so quickly, what I thought was, okay, everybody's going to see right through this, and we're all going to disobey, because the answers here are to completely disobey. And when everybody didn't, I was completely shocked. I was shocked at the response of the people. They began to buy it and go with it. Okay, now I'm going to tell you something. In the first 8 months of this, in California alone, the big corporations, Walmart, Home Depot, especially Amazon, profited a whopping $4 billion over their normal earnings. Meanwhile, 67 million people lost their jobs, and 98,000 small businesses went out forever. That's one state. Now, what do you think would have happened if everybody would have said, fuck you, we're going to disobey, and all the places would have stayed open, and you and me would have all stopped going to the big corporate stores, because obviously this is an attempt to put the small businesses out of business so that they will control all of our needs. And then they want to get rid of the cash so that they will control the money. So what do you think would have happened if all of us quit those places, began to frequent the mom and pop shops and spend cash? We would have totally fucked them. A lot of us have been doing this right since the beginning, and if everybody was doing that, Walmart, these guys would have went out of business already. They would have went out of business, even if half of us was doing it. We would have hurt them where it counts, but we didn't. We did all the wrong things. We still went to them. Mom and pop, I look for mom and pop everywhere I go, and when I look, I find them. I rarely have to get anything from corporations. Mom and pop would have been scampering to keep up. These are people, my people, who are trying to make a living. They're the backbone of the economy. They're not people that are trying to take my country down. Okay, now, throughout my life, I've been asked a lot of times if I've ever been in the military, and my answer is always no, and I'm going to tell you why. The main reason is because they've never given me a good reason for any of the wars they've had. Now we find out all these years later that the wars were all fabricated. Mexico has not been involved in a war in over 70 years. How come we keep getting involved in them? They haven't given me a good reason. The war on terror, it's all a bunch of made-up shit. Even when I was a kid, I'm like, why are we over in Vietnam? Halfway around the world. There's no sense in it. Okay, so you have to give me a good reason. I would have went to World War II. It was the last one that was reasonable. So my point here is all throughout history, the people have served lunatics. Okay, they go to work for psychotic lunatics and destroy their own country. Joseph Stalin is responsible for the deaths of between 60 and 80 million people. Okay, mostly his own countrymen, but he didn't kill them. He got his own countrymen to kill their own people. So people follow these lunatics, and this is why human history has always been the same. And if there is, always look back through it. It's always been rulers ruling and the common man suffering. Okay, when that does not need to happen. And these rulers are just one man or a small handful of guys. They can't do anything without us fucking doing it for them. So if there's a better place after this, a lot of people think you go to heaven and stuff. Maybe that's true. But here's the deal. If everybody goes there with the same mind they have here, it's going to be the same as here. This would be heaven here if we didn't act like this. So the bottom line is, think for yourself. And if they're telling you, use your own brain. Now, I thought everybody could see these things just as easily as me, but I've come to find out that's not true. For some reason, it's always been clear to me. But there's people who've been able to see this stuff since far back before me. There's people that sing, a lot of times they call them conspiracy theorists, right? Crazy conspiracy theorists. But as the conspiracy theories become conspiracy facts, what we're seeing is that a lot of these guys were really just guys who had greater vision than us, right? Mine's pretty good, but not as good as a lot of guys. And so the bottom line is, until a person learns to think for themselves and say, fuck you, you're a lunatic, I'm not working for you, I don't care how much money you offer me, I'm not going to betray my own people. We will always be like this. So human history will always repeat itself. We've had to help them do this. They can't do this without us doing it for them, because the guys at the top, there's like 130 people at the top of this thing, guys. And so what I'm trying to get the point out here is it looks like they've won. It looks like we're going to lose this. And mostly it's because of the way our own people are acting. So it's very important. And what floors me is that people won't go look for the real information. It's there, but they won't go look. I'm like, that is so important. So if there's a better place, people can't act that way. It's not going to work. So if you take a look, I'm going to provide you some information. If you go in there, I made one video about how to find a lot of information. If you go in there and start to look, you will begin to find real truths and use your own brain to see if it makes sense to you. Don't listen to me. Use your own brain. But in this, we are looking at losing everything that we have very soon. And so it's really, really important. We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the light of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries. David Rockefeller. All right, guys, I will see you on the next video.